I'd like to present a question that our team was asked in the earlier phases of developing. We were Debate a Gary Johnson supporter Facebook page, and then after the election, we transitioned to Ask a Libertarian Facebook page, which gave a more broad audience appeal for us. And one of the questions that we were asked was perfect for this miscellaneous category. It was it was slightly disturbing, just to be honest. One of the people asked, would necrophilia be legal in a libertarian society? So I would just like to forward this question to you in an anarchist society. And what we couldn't just simply say yes or no. We had to offer a rationale explanation for why we supported what we supported. So in my humble curiosity, what would have you responded to our fan?
Okay. So there are all sorts of behaviors that some people find distasteful. So there's multiple parts to this answer, probably. The first part is that in a free society, people are going to organize with communities of like mind. And those communities are going to voluntarily agree to behave by certain behavioral standards. So if you're in a community that abhors necrophilia and you've agreed voluntarily to live in that community, and then you transgress that particular thing, then you're going to suffer whatever consequences you agreed to suffer when you chose to move into that community and abide by those rules. That's kind of phase one. So phase two would be, or answer, maybe another part two of the answer, if we just want to put aside the practical, like what would happen in society and communities organizing thing, and we just want to talk about the ethics. What is the ethics of such an act? All rights are property rights. And so the thing that makes it immoral for you, well, let's not use me as an example because that makes the conversation intimate. So the thing that makes person A unable to ethically force themselves on person B's body while they're alive is because person B has ownership of that property. They have ownership of that body. Ownership, the coolest way to explain ownership, in my opinion, is it is the right to exclude others from the use of that thing. Like, that is the shortest, most condensed, what is property, what is a property right answer I've ever heard. So person B has the right to exclude others from the use of that property. So person A, that means rape is immoral because person B doesn't consent. If person B ceases to exist, it's still a piece of property. Who owns it? I would say that most likely all property generally by default is understood to fall to, the family of the deceased. And so I would also assume that the family of the deceased would disallow people from using that property in any nefarious ways that they wanted. Therefore, it would still be just as much a violation of property rights as it would have been when the person was still alive. How is that? That was the first time I've ever taken on necrophilia.
I think your answer actually provides for great substance in a very real realm of property rights. And where does that line get drawn, and whose property is whose if the person is deceased? So the next question regarding that would be, if the person is deceased, okay, in an anarchist society, if the person is deceased, and let's say, person B is deceased, then person A engages sexually with them, which is very disturbing. But at what point would there be a punishment involved? So I think it's a very serious issue because the family members of the deceased person, who would they call for there to be a just punishment for the person that violated the property rights of the deceased person?
So again, this is a practical discussion based on our predictions on how a free society would work. So this is very difficult to do because if you think back to the times of slavery, if I was trying to convince you that slavery was immoral and it should be ended today, and you responded by saying, well, how would the cotton get picked after we free the slaves? You have to explain that to me and prove that it'll work before I agree with you that it's a good thing to do to free the slaves. No, well, let's do the right thing today and free the slaves and we'll figure out how it'll work when it works. That's kind of the same thing we're doing here. We're just going to try and fun and playtime predict how a free society might work, but I'm not saying that the ethics of it hinge on the practicality of my ability to predict how it's going to work in the future. We have to absolutely end slavery today, and if that means more necrophilia, which I don't think it would, but if that's the outcome until we figure out how to handle that situation, it doesn't matter because it's important that we end slavery today. So that's my preface to that. So practically, how would I predict that might be handled? And again, we don't have to use necrophilia. Sorry, we don't have to use necrophilia. I haven't said that word a lot. Imagine that. We don't have to use that example to illustrate it. It can be any property violation, any trespass. You know, person A comes on person B's property. I shouldn't say it that way. Person A enters person B's. This is a lot of landmines here. So, person A trespasses on person B's property, damages something. How is that going to be handled in a free society? Is just kind of like an it's an equal conversation without the overtones. So, or undertones, Undertaker. Anyway.
So how would you answer that without the undertones?
It's property. So, anytime someone damages your person or property, you're owed restitution. And that's just a fancy way of saying, that's like a layer on top of a layer on top of a layer of just saying the non-aggression principle. You do not have the right to initiate force on peaceful people unless it's self-defense. Well, that's what the initiation part means. So if somebody initiates force against you, you can certainly respond with force. Why is that? Because all rights are simply a reciprocal understanding between sentient people. And when somebody signals to you with action that they don't respect your property rights, you no longer have a requirement to respect their property rights. So, build on that a couple levels, and now we have a property dispute between somebody that damaged property or trespassed or raped or whatever. They're owed restitution for that crime. That's a fancy way of saying I can now use force against you to make myself whole again or to defend myself. I think in a civilized society, you're not going to have a great demand for vigilante justice being a thing because that's usually messy, it's usually error-prone. People want a justice system. There's a demand for that now. That's one of the biggest objections I get when I start talking to people about a free society without government. Well, how will we have a justice system? We need that. We can't lose our justice system. There's a demand for that. So that means there's going to be a lot of insanely smart business people competing with each other now to provide the most just, the most respectable, the most affordable, which is something that you don't have now, justice system to resolve property disputes. Your insurance company will likely have a menu for you to select from of which, justice company you want them to, handle your disputes through, as will the attacker's, company will have an agreed justice system, and there will be arbitration, and crimes will get handled, and restitution will be assigned in these ways. Again, it's a consensual system, unlike what we have now.